My spoiled brat sister stole my money to buy a new phone, so I returned the car that my parents bought for her and kept the money. My parents have always treated me and my sister differently for as long as I can remember. Whenever there was a fight, they would always take her side. When we were 8, she broke the antique vase that held my grandmother's ashes. It was very dear to my mother and she knew she was in trouble, so she blamed it on me. I tried telling them that I was in my room when it happened, but they didn't listen. I was grounded for a whole week while my sister was rewarded with her favorite food for telling them the truth. They also wouldn't celebrate my birthday because they were too busy working, but they would always go all out for my sister's birthday and buy her whatever present she asked for. Even though her demands got ridiculous at times, like wanting the latest phone at just 12 years of age, my parents never said no to her. Meanwhile, if I wanted to get new clothes to wear, I had to beg and do chores for a whole week. You see, my parents considered our grades to be the most important thing in the world. She would always get the highest grade in school, so my parents would praise her nonstop. I really tried to match her performance by working hard, but never did as well. So they would always tell me things like, maybe if you learned more from your sister, you wouldn't be such a disappointment. And my sister kept on taking advantage of their favoritism. Things like snatching the TV remote from me and taking my toys but never sharing hers were normal. But she also went too far sometimes. One time I was really excited for my school field trip and spent the entire week preparing for it. My sister saw that and decided to sabotage me by lying to my parents. She told them that I had been peeping on the girls' washroom in school, and to my surprise, they believed her without even checking for proof. They never called the school to confirm, and simply decided to punish me by not allowing me to go on the trip. That day, I realized that my parents were never going to take my side. I began spending my time at my friend's house so I wouldn't have to listen to my sister's demands all day long. I also took on a job in high school so I could pay for my own stuff. That was because I never got an allowance like my sister. I was being careful and saving up money because I wanted to move out at 18 and get away from her. For her 16th birthday, my parents bought her a brand new car, and she made sure to rub it in my face. Whenever I had to go somewhere, she would ask me if I wanted a lift, and then proceed to say, "Oops, sorry, I can't waste my fuel on useless people." As time went on, I simply ignored her and kept to myself. There would be days when my parents didn't say a single word to me, but I was more than happy to be ignored rather than punished. Now, my 18th birthday is in a few weeks, and I had saved enough money to make a deposit and rent my own apartment. But I was having trouble looking for a decent place, so that money was being hidden in my room. I would check if it was still there before going to sleep every night, just as a way of feeling secure. But then I made the mistake of talking on the phone when my sister was home and probably listening in. She heard me talk about the apartment and how I had some money saved up. She instantly barged into my room and asked, "I want to buy a new phone, so do you think you could share some of your money with me?" She had asked the same question to our parents, and they had said no because their finances were running a bit dry. I couldn't believe that she was asking me to hand over money that I had earned on my own, and told her a firm no. I told her that this money was for me, and that if she wanted, she could get a job herself. She refused, and got mad at me for suggesting that she should work. Then she ran away, and I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it was over. However, when I came home the next day, I saw my sister holding the new iPhone 15. She was telling our parents that she had bought it with her own money, and they were praising her to be so independent. I immediately rushed to my room and saw that everything was on the floor. She had searched through all of my belongings and found the money I had kept hidden. She had taken the exact amount that her new phone would have cost. I rushed back down and screamed at her, telling her to return my money, but my dad got in my way and told me to calm down. I explained to him that she had stolen my money to buy that phone, even though I was saving up for an apartment. I demanded that she return my money right now, or else I would report her for theft. But just like always, my parents took her side. They said that she would never lie about something like that, and I was attempting to undermine her efforts. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my sister smirking as my parents told me to apologize to her. I refused to do what they said, because I was telling the truth. I said I can prove it by showing them my room and how it was ransacked, but they still didn't listen to me. I was appalled to see how they were blind to my sister's antics, and how little they cared about anything I said. I decided that enough was enough, and that I would get my money back one way or another. I knew those three were going on a vacation next week without me, so I waited. I acted like I didn't care that my sister had stolen the money. She would walk by me and taunt me by saying, "I hope your money is safe," but I just replied, "I hope so too," and kept waiting. The day they went out, I went into her room and took her car keys. I drove to the nearest dealership that bought used cars, and sold it for whatever amount they were willing to give. I'm pretty sure I got less than half of what it was worth, but I didn't care. I had gotten more money than she had stolen from me. Then I rented whatever apartment was available, and moved all my stuff before they came back. I also blocked them and never told them my address, so they have literally no way of contacting me. I regret not being able to see my sister's face when she realized her car was missing, and so was I. I thought I was finally free of that toxic environment, but never did I expect my sister to find me and do something crazy. I needed to protect myself, but I didn't know where to start. I'd never been in a situation like this before. Growing up, I'd always been the one on the defensive, trying to avoid Amber's schemes rather than anticipating them. Now I needed to think like her, calculating, strategic, always one step ahead. First things first, I changed all my passwords, email, social media, bank accounts. Everything got new, complex passwords that Amber couldn't possibly guess. I spent an entire evening hunched over my laptop, methodically going through every account I owned, creating unique combinations of letters, numbers, and symbols that would be impossible to crack. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a sense of urgency driving me to secure everything as quickly as possible. I set up two-factor authentication wherever possible. If she wanted access to my accounts, she'd need my phone too. I downloaded authentication apps, linked them to my most important accounts, and tested the system multiple times to ensure it was working properly. The extra layer of security made me feel slightly more protected, though I knew Amber's determination shouldn't be underestimated. Next, I called the bank to report the unauthorized access attempt. The customer service representative was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "We don't see any successful logins from unrecognized devices," she said, her voice tinged with boredom. "But we can put a security alert on your account if you're concerned." Her casual tone suggested this was a routine call for her, just another paranoid customer overreacting to a potential security breach. "Yes, please," I said, gripping my phone tightly. "And is there any way to see where the login attempt came from?" My knuckles were white from the pressure, anxiety making my palms sweat against the plastic case of my phone. "I'm afraid we don't have that information available." She sounded like she was reading from a script, uninterested in my specific situation or concerns. After hanging up, I paced around my apartment, my mind racing. What would Amber do next? She wasn't the type to give up easily, and now that she knew where I lived, I didn't feel safe. My new apartment, which had felt like a sanctuary just days ago, now seemed vulnerable and exposed. I checked the locks on my door and windows repeatedly, jumping at every noise from the hallway or street below. I later discovered she'd found me through a mutual acquaintance from high school, someone I'd foolishly mentioned my new address to, not realizing they still kept in touch with Amber. It was Jessica, a girl who had been friendly with both of us, though closer to Amber. I had run into her at the grocery store shortly after moving, and, in a moment of poor judgment, told her about my new place when she asked how I was doing. I hadn't considered that she might relay that information to my sister. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. I promise." The words glowed ominously on my screen, sending a chill down my spine. Though the number was unfamiliar, I knew instantly who it was from. Only Amber could pack so much menace into 5 simple words. I blocked the number immediately, but the damage was done. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. This was just the beginning. I knew Amber well enough to understand that she wouldn't stop at threats. She would take action, and I needed to be prepared for whatever she might do next. The next morning, I woke up to an email notification that made my blood run cold. Someone had applied for a credit card in my name. The email congratulated me on my new application and promised to review it promptly. I stared at the screen in disbelief, then panic, as I realized what was happening. I immediately called the credit card company to report the fraud, but the customer service representative informed me that this wasn't the first application. "I'm seeing 3 credit card applications under your name in the past week," she said, her voice clinical and detached. 2 were approved. She rattled off the details as if reading a grocery list, completely unaware of how each word increased my anxiety. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I didn't apply for any credit cards. I felt physically ill, imagining the damage Amber could do with access to credit in my name. How long had this been going on? How much debt could she rack up before I caught it? "Well, someone did, using your social security number and personal information." The representative's matter-of-fact tone made the situation seem even more surreal. Identity theft. Amber had stolen more than just my cash savings. She'd stolen my identity, and she'd been doing it for longer than I realized. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and dizzy. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. She was systematically trying to destroy my financial future. I spent the entire morning on the phone, placing fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus and disputing the credit card applications. By lunchtime, I was exhausted and terrified. How much damage could she do with my personal information? And how had she gotten my social security number? My throat was dry from hours of explaining my situation to various customer service representatives, repeating the same details over and over, trying to convince strangers that I was the victim, not the perpetrator. Then I remembered. Our parents kept all our important documents in a filing cabinet in their home office. Amber would have had easy access to my birth certificate, social security card, everything she needed to open accounts in my name. I could picture the cabinet clearly. A tall, beige metal structure with 4 drawers, each neatly labeled. The bottom drawer contained family records, birth certificates, social security cards, passports. It was never locked because my parents never imagined one of their children would use those documents for fraud. I needed to check my credit report. The online portal showed several hard inquiries from credit card companies and, to my horror, an auto loan application from 2 days ago, the day after I sold her car. She was trying to finance a new one using my credit. The screen displayed a list of recent inquiries, each one a punch to my gut. Amber wasn't just trying to inconvenience me. She was attempting to systematically destroy my financial reputation before I had even had a chance to build it. My phone rang. Another unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. My finger hovered over the decline button for a moment before I changed my mind and accepted the call. "Hello?" My voice sounded small and uncertain, even to my own ears. "Is this Elise Morgan?" a professional-sounding voice asked. The woman's tone was businesslike but not unfriendly. "Yes. Who's this?" I gripped the phone tightly, bracing myself for bad news. "This is Sandra from Westlake Auto Finance. I'm calling about your application for an auto loan." She spoke with the practiced efficiency of someone who makes dozens of similar calls each day. My heart raced. I didn't apply for an auto loan. The words came out more forcefully than I intended, my frustration with the entire situation bubbling to the surface. There was a pause. "Well, someone did, using your information. The application was submitted 2 days ago for a 2023 Mercedes." Sandra's voice took on a note of suspicion, as if she was now questioning whether I was being truthful. A Mercedes. Of course. Amber wouldn't settle for replacing her old car with something reasonable. The Toyota Camry I'd sold hadn't been enough for her. She wanted to upgrade, to come out of this situation with something even better than what she'd had before, and she was planning to stick me with the bill. "That application is fraudulent," I said firmly. "I did not apply for that loan." I tried to keep my voice steady, to project confidence and authority despite the panic I was feeling. "I see," Sandra said, her tone changing. "In that case, you'll want to file a police report for identity theft. We'll need a copy of that report to remove the inquiry from your credit." She became more sympathetic now, apparently convinced by my vehemence that I was indeed a victim. A police report. The thought made my stomach churn. Filing a police report meant officially accusing Amber of a crime. It meant potential legal consequences for her. As much as she deserved it, the idea of getting the police involved felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But what choice did I have? She was systematically destroying my financial future before it even began. If I didn't stop her now, the damage could follow me for years, affecting my ability to rent apartments, get jobs, buy a car, or home of my own. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I thanked Sandra and hung up, then sat on my couch staring at the wall. I needed advice from someone who wasn't emotionally involved in the situation, someone objective. The plain white wall offered no answers, just a blank canvas for my racing thoughts and fears. I called Marcus from work. He'd always been kind to me, and I knew he'd dealt with identity theft before when his wallet was stolen last year. Marcus had been my friend since high school, one of the few people who saw through Amber's perfect facade and recognized the manipulation beneath. He had witnessed firsthand how my family treated me and had often offered his home as a refuge when things got particularly bad. Marcus, it's me. I have a problem and I don't know what to do. My voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotional turmoil I was trying to contain. What's going on? His voice was calm, steady. The familiar sound brought me a small measure of comfort, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone in this. I explained the situation, Amber stealing my money, me selling her car, and now the identity theft. I left out some of the more painful family history, but gave him enough context to understand. The words poured out of me in a rush, the whole ugly story spilling forth as Marcus listened patiently on the other end of the line. You need to file a police report, he said without hesitation. Identity theft is serious. It can take years to clean up the mess if you don't act quickly. His directness was exactly what I needed. No sugarcoating, just practical advice. But she's my sister, I said, my voice small. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that hesitated to take such a definitive step against a family member. Years of conditioning to protect and excuse Amber were hard to overcome. Who stole from you and is now trying to destroy your credit? He reminded me. Look, I know it's hard, but you need to protect yourself. His voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. Deep down, I knew he was right. I thanked him and promised to keep him updated. After hanging up, I sat for a few more minutes, gathering my courage. Then I grabbed my keys and headed to the police station. The police station was cold and intimidating. I sat in a hard plastic chair, filling out forms and trying not to second-guess myself. The chair was uncomfortable, forcing me to shift position every few minutes. Around me, officers moved with purpose, their radios occasionally crackling with static and coded messages. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow that made everything look slightly unreal, like a scene from a TV crime drama rather than my actual life. When Officer Reynolds finally called me in to take my statement, I almost lost my nerve. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. His desk was cluttered with papers and files, a half-empty coffee mug pushed to one corner. He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from him, then pulled out a fresh form and clicked his pen. So your sister stole your identity, Officer Reynolds summarized after I explained the situation. And you believe she's opening credit cards and applying for loans in your name. His tone was neutral, neither believing nor disbelieving, simply recording the facts as I presented them. Yes, I said, and she stole cash from me first, about $2,000. I twisted my hands in my lap, fighting the urge to downplay what had happened, to make excuses for Amber as I had been trained to do my entire life. He made a note. And in retaliation, you sold her car? His pen paused above the paper as he looked up at me, one eyebrow slightly raised. I felt my face flush. It wasn't exactly her car. Our parents bought it for her. The words sounded weak even to my own ears, a flimsy justification for what I had done. But the vehicle wasn't registered in your name? Officer Reynolds' question was direct, cutting through my attempts to rationalize my actions. No, I admitted. The single word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Officer Reynolds looked at me over his glasses. So you sold a vehicle that didn't belong to you. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, delivered in a tone that made me shrink in my seat. My stomach dropped. I guess so, but she stole from me first. I sounded like a child, trying to justify bad behavior by pointing to someone else's worst behavior. That doesn't make selling someone else's property legal, he said. Your sister could file charges against you for that. His words were like a bucket of cold water, shocking me into a new perspective on my actions. I hadn't considered that possibility. In my mind, I was just getting back what was rightfully mine. But legally speaking, I had no right to sell that car. The realization made me feel slightly dizzy, the room seeming to tilt around me as I grappled with this new complication. What should I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt small and foolish, sitting there in that hard chair under the harsh lights, my attempt at justice now revealed as potentially criminal. About the identity theft, we'll file this report, and you should take a copy to the credit bureaus and any companies where fraudulent accounts were opened. He handed me a case number. About the car, I'd suggest consulting with an attorney. His tone softened slightly, perhaps seeing the genuine distress on my face. I left the police station feeling worse than when I went in. I'd wanted justice, but instead, I'd learned that I might be in legal trouble myself. The thought of Amber pressing charges against me made me feel physically ill. The bright sunshine outside seemed to mock my dark mood as I walked to my car, the case number clutched in my hand like a lifeline. When I got back to my apartment, there was a note taped to my door. My heart raced as I pulled it down and unfolded it. The paper was ordinary printer paper, the message written in Amber's unmistakable handwriting, loopy and slightly slanted to the right. I know what you did at the police station. Two can play that game. She was watching me, or someone was watching me for her. I looked around the hallway, suddenly feeling exposed. How had she known I went to the police? The thought that she might be monitoring my movements sent a chill down my spine. I later found out she'd been monitoring my movements through a tracking app she'd somehow installed on my phone during one of her snooping sessions before I moved out. The app was disguised as a system utility, something I would never think to check or delete. It had been silently reporting my location to her for weeks, allowing her to track my every movement. I hurried inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. This was escalating faster than I could handle. I needed help. The walls of my small apartment seemed to close in around me, no longer offering protection, but feeling like a trap. If Amber knew where I lived, knew my movements, what else might she do? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did it go at the station? The screen illuminated in the dimness of my apartment, his name a welcome sight amid all the unknown numbers and threatening messages. I texted back, "Not great. Can we talk? I think I need a lawyer." My thumbs moved quickly across the screen, the message brief but conveying my desperation. "I have a friend who's an attorney. I'll send you her information." His response came almost immediately, a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. A few minutes later, he texted me the contact information for Ellie Young, an attorney who specialized in identity theft cases. I called her office immediately and was relieved when they offered me a consultation the next day. The receptionist's calm, professional voice was reassuring as she scheduled the appointment, making me feel that perhaps there was a way out of this mess after all. That night, I barely slept. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. The building's usual sounds, neighbors coming and going, the hum of the heating system, distant conversations, all seemed sinister now, potential threats rather than the normal background noise of apartment living. I kept checking my phone, half expecting more threatening texts from Amber. By morning, I was exhausted and on edge, dark circles under my eyes testifying to my restless night. Ellie Young's office was in a small building downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 30s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that I found reassuring. Her office was neat and organized, with law books lining one wall and framed diplomas on another. She gestured for me to sit in a comfortable chair across from her desk, then folded her hands and gave me her full attention. "So your sister has been opening accounts in your name," she said after I explained the situation. "And you sold a car that belonged to her, or technically, to your parents." Her summary was concise and accurate, cutting through the emotional tangle to the core legal issues. "Yes," I admitted. "I know that was wrong now." The admission was difficult but necessary, a step toward dealing with the reality of my situation rather than my justifications for it. Ellie leaned forward. "Here's the situation as I see it. You both have potentially committed crimes. Her identity theft is more serious in the eyes of the law, but selling a car that wasn't yours is still conversion of property." Her direct approach was exactly what I needed. No judgment, just facts and potential solutions. What should I do? I leaned forward too, eager for guidance, for a clear path through this increasingly complicated situation. "First, we need to stop the bleeding. Have you frozen your credit?" She reached for a legal pad and began making notes as we spoke. I shook my head. "Do that immediately. It will prevent any new accounts from being opened. Then we need to gather evidence of the identity theft, the credit card applications, loan inquiries, everything." She wrote each item down as a bullet point, creating an action plan. "And what about the car?" The question that had been weighing on me since my conversation with Officer Reynolds. Ellie sighed. "That's trickier. Technically, you could be charged with theft, but if your sister is committing identity theft, she might not want to involve the police either. It could become a mutual assured destruction situation." She tapped her pen against the legal pad thoughtfully. "So what do I do?" I was desperate for clear direction, a step-by-step guide to navigate this mess. "For now, document everything. Every text, every note, every attempt to access your accounts. And don't communicate with your sister or parents without consulting me first." She tore the page from her legal pad and handed it to me, a list of actions to take, numbered and organized. I left Ellie's office with a to-do list and a slightly clearer head. I had a plan now, at least. First step, freeze my credit. The day was overcast, matching my mood, but there was a small spark of hope now, where before there had been only panic and confusion. I was in the middle of completing the credit freeze online when my phone rang. Unknown number again. I hesitated, then answered. The screen displayed no caller ID, just the word unknown, where a name or number should be. "Hello?" I tried to keep my voice steady, bracing myself for another threat or demand. "Is this Elise Morgan?" a man's voice asked. The voice was unfamiliar, professional, but with an edge of authority that immediately put me on alert. "Who's calling?" I countered, unwilling to confirm my identity to a stranger after everything that had happened. "This is Detective Wilson with the County Sheriff's Office. We're investigating a report of vehicle theft." His words hit me like a physical blow, confirming my worst fears. My heart stopped. Vehicle theft? The words came out as barely more than a whisper. "Yes. A report was filed yesterday regarding a 2022 Toyota Camry, registered to Robert and Diana Morgan, that was allegedly sold without authorization." He spoke matter-of-factly, as if this was just another case, not the potential unraveling of my entire life. They'd gone to the police. After everything Amber had done, they'd gone to the police about the car. Of course they had. They had always protected her, always taken her side. Why would this be any different? I need to speak with my attorney," I managed to say. Ellie's warning not to speak to anyone without her present echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the moment of panic. "That's your right," Detective Wilson said. "But we'd like you to come in for questioning. Today, if possible." His tone made it clear that while this was framed as a request, it wasn't really optional. I called Ellie immediately after hanging up. She agreed to meet me at the sheriff's office in an hour. "Don't say anything without me present," she warned. Not a word. Her voice was calm but firm, giving me strength for what lay ahead. The sheriff's office was even more intimidating than the city police station. The building was older, with worn linoleum floors and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled of coffee and paper, with an undertone of industrial cleaner. Officers in tan uniforms moved purposefully through the hallways, barely glancing at me as I waited nervously in the lobby. Detective Wilson was a stern-looking man with salt and pepper hair and a gaze that made me feel like he could see right through me. His office was small and cluttered, with case files stacked on every available surface. A coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" printed on it sat on his desk, a humanizing touch that seemed at odds with his intimidating demeanor. "Miss Morgan," he said as Ellie and I sat down across from him. "Thank you for coming in. As I mentioned on the phone, we're investigating the unauthorized sale of a vehicle belonging to Robert and Diana Morgan." He opened a file folder, glancing down at the report inside before fixing his gaze on me again. "My client is aware of the allegation," Ellie said smoothly. "However, there are complicating factors in this case that you should be aware of." She sat perfectly straight in her chair, projecting confidence and competence. She proceeded to explain about Amber's theft of my money and the subsequent identity theft. Detective Wilson listened, occasionally making notes. His expression remained neutral, giving no indication of whether he believed our account or not. "So you're saying this was retaliation for your sister's actions?" he asked me. His tone was not accusatory, but curious, as if trying to understand the full picture. Before I could answer, Ellie interjected. "My client acknowledges that selling the vehicle was an error in judgment. However, we believe the family's decision to pursue charges is motivated by a desire to prevent her from exposing her sister's more serious crimes." She spoke firmly but respectfully, presenting our case in the most favorable light possible. Detective Wilson looked at me. "Do you have evidence of this identity theft?" His pen hovered over his notepad, ready to record my answer. I nodded and pulled out the folder I'd prepared with printouts of the fraudulent credit applications and loan inquiries. The folder was thick with documents, each one a piece of the puzzle showing Amber's systematic attempt to destroy my financial future. He looked through them, his expression unreadable. "And you filed a police report about this?" He flipped through the pages methodically, pausing occasionally to read a particular document more carefully. "Yes, with Officer Reynolds at the City Police Department yesterday." I watched his face anxiously, trying to gauge his reaction to the evidence. Detective Wilson made another note. "I'll need to coordinate with them on this. The situations appear to be connected." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps recognition that this case was more complex than a simple vehicle theft. After more questioning, he finally let us go with a warning that the investigation was ongoing. "We'll be in touch," he said as we stood to leave. "Don't leave town without notifying us." The standard police warning sounded ominous in my ears, a reminder that I wasn't out of danger yet. Outside, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The fresh air felt good after the stuffy confines of the detective's office, but my relief was tempered by the knowledge that this was far from over. "What happens now?" I asked Ellie. We stood in the parking lot, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. "Now we wait, and we gather more evidence against your sister. The stronger our case against her, the more leverage we have." She checked her watch, then gave me a reassuring smile. "You did well in there. Just keep following the plan we discussed." Over the next few days, I did exactly that. I obtained copies of all the credit inquiries, documented every suspicious activity on my accounts, and kept a log of every communication from Amber or my parents. Each piece of evidence went into a growing file, a paper trail of Amber's attempts to destroy my life. I also returned to work, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, despite the chaos in my personal life. The familiar routine of my job was comforting, a few hours each day where I could focus on something other than the ongoing legal drama. My desk became a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I had control and competence. Marcus was supportive, giving me flexible hours to deal with the legal issues and checking in regularly. His friendship was one of the few bright spots in this difficult time, a reminder that not everyone in my life was against me. One afternoon, he stopped by my desk with a concerned look. "Everything okay? You seem distracted today." He perched on the edge of my desk, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. I sighed. "Just more drama with my sister. She somehow got my work email and has been sending messages to me and some of my colleagues." That morning, I'd arrived to find several coworkers giving me strange looks. One had forwarded me an email from me, claiming I was planning to quit soon, and had been bad-mouthing the company to potential clients. His eyebrows shot up. "What kind of messages?" His expression darkened as he realized the extent of Amber's harassment. "Mostly lies about me, trying to make me look bad." I ran a hand through my hair, exhaustion evident in every movement. "She's trying to damage my reputation here, maybe even get me fired." I later discovered she'd found my workplace through social media. I'd forgotten to update my privacy settings on an old LinkedIn profile, which still showed my current employer. It was a careless oversight that had given Amber yet another avenue to attack me. Marcus frowned. "That's harassment. Have you told HR?" His concern was touching, a reminder that someone was on my side in all this. I shook my head. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it." The thought of drawing more attention to the situation, of having to explain my family drama to my employers, was mortifying. "It is a big deal," he insisted. "This is your workplace. She can't be allowed to interfere with your job." His voice was firm but kind, pushing me to stand up for myself in a way I'd rarely done before. He was right, of course. I'd spent so many years minimizing Amber's behavior, making excuses, trying to keep the peace. It was a hard habit to break. Growing up in my family, I'd learned that the path of least resistance was to stay quiet, to absorb the blows rather than fight back. But that approach had led me here, to a place where Amber felt entitled to destroy not just my personal life, but my professional one as well. That evening, I received an email that made my blood run cold. It was from a loan officer at my bank, confirming an appointment to discuss a mortgage application, a mortgage I hadn't applied for. The email was cheerful and congratulatory, completely at odds with the panic it induced in me. I called the bank immediately and explained the situation. They confirmed that someone had applied for a $350,000 mortgage in my name, using my personal information and employment details. The application had been submitted online, but an in-person appointment was required to proceed. The customer service representative sounded alarmed as she placed a fraud alert on my account, promising to flag the application for review. This was escalating beyond credit cards and car loans. Amber was trying to take out a mortgage in my name. The potential damage was staggering. If she succeeded, I would be saddled with a debt that would take decades to pay off. If I could pay it off at all, my financial future would be effectively ruined before it had even begun. I forwarded the email to Ellie with a panicked message. She called me within minutes. "This is good," she said, which was not the response I expected. Her voice was calm, almost pleased, completely at odds with my own panic. "Good? How is this good?" I paced my small apartment, unable to sit still, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. Because it's evidence. Clear, undeniable evidence of identity theft. And because mortgage fraud is a federal crime. She explained that while credit card fraud could sometimes be dismissed as a misunderstanding, mortgage fraud was taken much more seriously by law enforcement. What should I do? I stopped pacing, hope beginning to replace panic as I realized Ellie had a plan. "Keep the appointment," she said, "but I'm coming with you. We're going to set a trap." The confidence in her voice was reassuring, making me believe for the first time that we might actually be able to stop Amber. The plan was simple but nerve-wracking. I would show up for the mortgage appointment as scheduled. Ellie would accompany me as my financial advisor. If Amber showed up pretending to be me, we'd have her caught red-handed. If she didn't, we'd have documentation of the fraudulent application to add to our growing file of evidence. It was a win-win situation, Ellie assured me, though my churning stomach didn't feel like winning. The day of the appointment, I was a nervous wreck. What if Amber didn't show up? What if she did, but somehow managed to talk her way out of it? What if my parents were with her? The possibilities swirled in my mind as I got dressed, choosing clothes that looked professional but comfortable, preparing for what might be a long and stressful day. Ellie and I arrived at the bank 20 minutes early and explained the situation to the branch manager, who agreed to cooperate. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a serious demeanor, clearly concerned about potential fraud being committed through his branch. He led us to his office, where he made a quick phone call to security, alerting them to the situation without providing details that might tip off Amber if she was already in the building. We waited in his office, out of sight of the lobby. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching out with excruciating tension. I kept checking my watch, then the clock on the wall, as if the constant monitoring of time could somehow speed it up or slow it down according to my needs. At exactly 2 p.m., the loan officer came to inform us that Elise Morgan had arrived for her appointment. My heart pounded as the branch manager led us through a back hallway to a small observation room with a one-way mirror overlooking the loan officer's desk. The room was cramped and dimly lit, designed for security personnel to monitor suspicious activity without being seen. And there she was, Amber, sitting confidently across from the loan officer, her hair styled like mine, even wearing a similar outfit to what I typically wore to work. The sight of her there, casually impersonating me, sent a surge of anger through my body that momentarily overwhelmed my anxiety. "That's her," I whispered to Ellie. "That's my sister." My voice shook slightly, a mix of rage and disbelief making it difficult to speak normally. We watched as Amber smoothly answered questions about her employment and financial situation. She had documents, forged pay stubs, bank statements, even a fake ID with my name but her photo. The level of preparation was staggering. She spoke confidently, maintaining eye contact with the loan officer, occasionally smiling or laughing at appropriate moments. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she was me. She had studied my mannerisms, my speech patterns, even the way I tucked my hair behind my ear when thinking. "I've seen enough," Ellie said after a few minutes. She nodded to the branch manager who made a phone call. Her face was set in determined lines, all business now that we had confirmed what we suspected. Within minutes, 2 police officers entered the loan officer's office. They moved quickly and professionally, positioning themselves on either side of Amber before she realized what was happening. The look of shock on Amber's face as they asked for her identification was something I'll never forget. Her confident smile faltered, then disappeared entirely, replaced by a look of panic that I had rarely seen on her always composed face. "There must be some mistake," she stammered, still trying to maintain the charade. She fumbled in her purse, perhaps looking for the fake ID, her hands shaking visibly even from our vantage point behind the one-way glass. "No mistake, Miss Morgan. Or should I say, Miss Amber Morgan," one of the officers said. "You're being detained on suspicion of identity theft and attempted mortgage fraud." His voice was calm but firm as he read her rights, the familiar words from countless TV shows now playing out in real life before my eyes. I watched through the window as they handcuffed my sister and read her rights. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt hollow. This was my sister. Despite everything she'd done, seeing her in handcuffs was difficult. The image stirred complicated emotions, satisfaction that justice was being served, but also a deep sadness for what our relationship had become, for what might have been in a different family, under different circumstances. Ellie put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing. She was trying to ruin your financial future." Her touch was comforting, grounding me in the moment when I felt like I might float away on a tide of conflicting emotions. I nodded, but couldn't find words. The lump in my throat made speech impossible as I watched Amber being led away, her head down, no longer the confident, entitled person who had walked into the bank, but a scared young woman facing serious consequences for her actions. After giving statements to the police, Ellie and I left the bank. I felt drained, like I'd just run a marathon. The emotional toll of the day had left me exhausted, barely able to put one foot in front of the other as we walked to the parking lot. "What happens now?" I asked. The bright afternoon sun seemed at odds with my mood, too cheerful for the gravity of what had just occurred. "Now the criminal justice system takes over," Ellie explained. "Amber will likely be charged with identity theft, fraud, forgery, multiple felonies. Given the evidence and the fact that she was caught in the act, she's facing serious consequences." She unlocked her car, gesturing for me to get in so we could talk privately. Will I have to testify against her? The thought of standing in court, facing Amber across a courtroom, filled me with dread. Possibly, if it goes to trial. But with the evidence we have, her attorney will likely advise her to take a plea deal. Ellie started the car but didn't pull out of the parking space, giving me time to process everything that had happened. I nodded, trying to process it all. "And what about the car? Will I be charged for that?" The question had been weighing on me since my conversation with Officer Reynolds, a dark cloud hanging over even this moment of victory. "I doubt it," Ellie said. "Now that your parents know the extent of Amber's crimes, they may be less inclined to pursue charges against you, but we should still be prepared." She gave me a reassuring smile before finally putting the car in drive and pulling out of the parking lot. That evening, I sat in my apartment, alone with my thoughts. I should have felt relieved that Amber had been caught, that her campaign against me was over. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also sadness, guilt, and a lingering anger that had nothing to do with Amber and everything to do with my parents. The small space that had felt like a sanctuary now seemed confining, the walls too close, the silence too complete. They had created this situation with years of favoritism and enabling. They had shaped Amber into the person she became, entitled, manipulative, willing to hurt others to get what she wanted. And they had shaped me too, making me doubt my own worth, teaching me that my needs and feelings didn't matter. The realization was painful, but clarifying, helping me understand that what had happened wasn't just about Amber's choices, but about the environment that had fostered those choices. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer. The screen displayed her name and number, bringing with it a flood of complicated emotions. My finger hovered over the decline button, tempted to avoid the conversation I knew would be difficult. But after a moment's hesitation, I picked up. Hello? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, guarded and uncertain. How could you? Her voice was raw with emotion. How could you have your own sister arrested? The accusation was immediate, without preamble or greeting, as if she had been waiting all day to unleash it. I closed my eyes, not surprised, but still disappointed. She was committing felony fraud, Mom. She was trying to take out a mortgage in my name. I kept my voice calm, factual, refusing to be drawn into an emotional argument. She says it's all a misunderstanding, my mother insisted. That you gave her permission to use your information. I could picture her face as she said this, the familiar expression of denial, the willful blindness that had characterized her parenting for as long as I could remember. Of course Amber would say that, and of course my mother would believe her. Some things never changed, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. That's not true, I said firmly, and you know it's not true. Amber stole from me. First my cash, then my identity. She was trying to destroy my credit and my future. For once, I didn't back down or soften my words to spare her feelings. The time for that was long past. She's your sister. The words were almost a wail, as if that relationship should excuse any behavior, no matter how harmful. Yes, she is, and you're my mother, but neither of you has acted like family to me. The truth of this statement hit me as I said it, bringing with it a wave of grief for the family I had never really had. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When my mother spoke again, her voice was different, quieter, less certain. Your father had another episode after we heard about Amber's arrest. The doctor says it's his heart. He's in the hospital. The change in topic was abrupt, a tactical shift that I recognized from years of similar conversations. My stomach dropped. Is he okay? Despite everything, I felt a surge of concern. Whatever our relationship, he was still my father, and the thought of him seriously ill was distressing. They're running tests, she said. He's stable for now. Her voice had lost some of its accusatory edge, replaced by genuine worry. I didn't know what to say. I felt guilty, but also angry that she was telling me this. Was it meant to make me feel responsible? To manipulate me into dropping the charges against Amber? The timing seemed suspicious, too convenient to be coincidental. I'm sorry to hear that, I said finally. I hope he'll be okay. The words were sincere, despite my suspicions about her motives for sharing this information. He's asking for you, she said. Will you come see him? There was a note of pleading in her voice that I wasn't accustomed to hearing from my always confident mother. I hesitated. Going to the hospital meant facing both my parents, possibly Amber too if she'd been released on bail. It meant stepping back into the family dynamic I'd fought so hard to escape. But if my father was truly ill, could I live with myself if something happened and I hadn't gone? The question weighed heavily on me, pulling me in opposite directions. I'll think about it, I said. Which hospital? I wasn't committing, but I wasn't refusing either. A middle ground that felt safer than either extreme. Memorial, room 415. She paused. Thank you. The gratitude seemed genuine. Another unusual note in this conversation that was already so different from our typical interactions. After we hung up, I called Ellie for advice. It could be legitimate, she said when I explained the situation. Or it could be a manipulation tactic. Either way, if you want to see your father, you should go. Just be prepared for potential confrontation. Her practical approach helped cut through my swirling emotions, giving me a clearer perspective on the situation. I decided to go the next morning. I didn't sleep well that night, my mind cycling through possible scenarios, rehearsing what I would say if confronted by my mother or Amber. The hours passed slowly, darkness giving way to the gray light of dawn as I lay awake, alternately anxious and resolved. Memorial Hospital was a sprawling complex on the east side of town. I found my way to the cardiac unit and approached room 415 with trepidation. The hospital smells, antiseptic, cleaning products, the underlying hint of illness, brought back memories of childhood visits to my grandmother before she passed away. The corridor was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes on the polished floor. Through the partially open door, I could see my father in the hospital bed, looking smaller and older than I remembered. The sight was shocking. He had always been a robust, imposing figure in my life, but now he seemed diminished, vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand. They were both looking down, neither speaking, the weight of recent events visible in the slump of their shoulders. I knocked softly on the doorframe. They both looked up, surprise registering on my father's face. You came, he said, his voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. The oxygen cannula in his nose and the IV in his arm underscored the seriousness of his condition. I stepped into the room, keeping my distance. Mom said you wanted to see me. I stood awkwardly just inside the doorway, unsure of my welcome despite the invitation. He nodded, then looked at my mother. Diana, could you give us a minute? His request seemed to surprise her as much as it did me. She seemed reluctant, but eventually stood and left the room, giving me a look I couldn't quite interpret as she passed. Was it warning? Pleading? Resignation? I couldn't tell, and at that moment, I was more focused on my father and whatever he wanted to say to me. Once we were alone, my father gestured to the chair beside his bed. Sit down. The command was gentler than his usual directives, More request than order. I did, perching on the edge of the seat, ready to leave if necessary. The vinyl chair was uncomfortable, designed for function rather than comfort, much like the conversation we were about to have. The doctor says I need bypass surgery, he said without preamble. Apparently I've been walking around with blocked arteries for years. He spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing someone else's medical condition rather than his own. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, unsure what else to say. The news was concerning but not entirely surprising. My father had never taken care of his health, working long hours, eating poorly, and managing stress through sheer force of will rather than healthy coping mechanisms. He waved a hand dismissively. It is what it is. Getting old isn't for the faint of heart. He looked at me directly. Your sister was arrested. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. I nodded. Yes. I braced myself for accusations, for the familiar pattern of him taking Amber's side against me. They're saying she committed fraud, identity theft. His tone was neutral, giving no indication of his feelings on the matter. She did, I confirmed. She stole my identity and tried to take out loans and credit cards in my name, even a mortgage. I kept my voice steady, stating facts rather than making accusations. He was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hands. And you're pressing charges. Again, his tone gave nothing away. Yes, I waited for the explosion, the anger, the disappointment that had characterized so many of our interactions over the years. Another long silence. Then, to my shock, he said, I don't blame you. The words were so unexpected that for a moment I thought I had misheard. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. What? The single word came out breathless, disbelieving. I said I don't blame you. He sighed heavily. The police showed us the evidence. The fake ID, the forged documents. It's pretty damning. He looked tired, defeated in a way I had never seen before. I didn't know how to respond. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. My father had never admitted being wrong, had never acknowledged Amber's faults, had certainly never taken my side against hers. The shift was so profound that I struggled to process it. Your mother doesn't want to believe it, he continued. She thinks there must be some explanation, but I've been doing a lot of thinking in here. He gestured around the hospital room. When you're facing your own mortality, it makes you look at things differently. His voice had a reflective quality that was new, a depth of introspection I hadn't known he was capable of. Dad, I started, not sure what I wanted to say, but feeling the need to respond somehow. He held up a hand to stop me. Let me finish. I haven't been a good father to you. I've favored your sister, made excuses for her behavior, blamed you for things that weren't your fault. I can see that now. The admission was so unexpected, so complete, that it left me speechless. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I'd spent years longing to hear him acknowledge the unfairness, but now that he was, I didn't know how to feel. The validation was powerful, but also painful, reopening old wounds even as it began to heal them. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why did you always take her side? It was the question that had haunted me for as long as I could remember, the one I had never dared to ask directly. He looked away. It was easier, I suppose. Amber is so much like your mother, emotional, demanding. It was easier to give in than to deal with the tantrums. And you were always so self-sufficient, so quiet. I told myself you didn't need as much attention. His honesty was brutal but also healing, answering questions I had carried for years. But I did, I said, the words catching in my throat. I needed you to believe me, to stand up for me. The admission of vulnerability was difficult, exposing needs I had learned to bury deep. I know that now. He looked back at me, his eyes tired. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. The damage we've done. To both of you, really. His acknowledgement of harm done to Amber, too, was surprising. A recognition that their favoritism had damaged her as well, enabling behaviors that had led to her current situation. I sat there, absorbing his words. Part of me wanted to rage at him, to list every injustice every time they'd chosen Amber over me. But another part, a part I hadn't known existed, felt a weight lifting. He saw it. After all these years, he finally saw it. The validation was powerful, even coming so late and under such circumstances. What happens now? I asked. The question encompassed so much. His health, Amber's legal troubles, our family's fractured relationships. With Amber? That's up to the courts. And you, I suppose, since you're the victim. He grimaced at the word. With us? That's up to you. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted nothing to do with us after all this. His honesty was refreshing, even as it acknowledged the depth of the damage done. I didn't have an answer for him. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Reconciliation seemed both possible and impossible in the same moment. A paradox I couldn't resolve sitting there in that hospital room with the beeping of monitors marking the passage of time. I should go, I said, standing up. I hope your surgery goes well. The words were sincere, despite everything. He nodded. Thank you for coming, and I'm sorry, for everything. The apology hung in the air between us. Insufficient, yet monumental. As I turned to leave, my mother was just outside the door. From her expression, I could tell she'd heard at least part of our conversation. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Is it true? She asked, her voice small. What they're saying about Amber? For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. The unwavering belief in Amber's perfection finally shaken. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Doubt. For the first time, she was questioning her golden child. The realization was startling, a shift in the family dynamic I had never thought possible. Yes, I said simply. It's true, all of it. I didn't elaborate or accuse, just stated the facts as I knew them. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears filling her eyes. How did we not see it? The question seemed directed more at herself than at me, the beginning of a painful reckoning with years of willful blindness. Because you didn't want to, I said, not unkindly. You never wanted to see anything that didn't fit the story you'd created. The observation wasn't meant to hurt, just to acknowledge the reality that had shaped our family for so long. She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. Your father's surgery is tomorrow morning. Will you come back? The request was tentative, uncertain, so different from her usual confident demands. I hesitated. I don't know. I need some time to think. It was an honest answer. I couldn't promise anything in that moment. Needed space to process everything that had happened and decide what, if anything, I wanted from this family going forward. As I walked out of the hospital, I felt strangely light, as if a burden I'd carried my whole life had been partially lifted. My father's acknowledgement, my mother's doubt, they were small things, perhaps, in the face of years of favoritism and neglect. But they were something, a crack in the facade, a possibility of change. The bright afternoon sunlight felt symbolic, illuminating a path forward that had previously been hidden in shadow. My phone buzzed with a text as I reached my car. It was from an unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was from. They'll choose me in the end. They always do. This isn't over. The words glowed on my screen, a digital reminder that not everything had changed, that some patterns were deeply ingrained and resistant to change. Amber. I later learned she'd been released on bail and had borrowed a fellow inmate's contraband phone to send the message. Somehow, even from jail, she'd found a way to reach me, to threaten me, to try to pull me back into the toxic dynamic. Her determination was both impressive and disturbing, a reminder of how deeply she believed in her right to manipulate and control. But this time, I didn't feel the usual fear and doubt. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pity. Amber truly believed our parents would save her, would excuse her behavior, would choose her over justice, because that's what they'd always done. She didn't realize that something had shifted, that for the first time they were seeing her clearly. The realization that her safety net might be gone would be devastating for her, a fundamental restructuring of her understanding of the world and her place in it. I deleted the message without responding and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. What would happen to Amber? Would my parents really change? Or would they revert to their old patterns once the shock wore off? And what did I want my relationship with them to be going forward? The questions had no easy answers, but for the first time, I felt capable of finding my own way through them, of making choices based on what was best for me, rather than what would cause the least conflict. I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I had choices, real choices, not just the choice to escape or endure. And that, more than anything else, felt like freedom. As I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, I realized that whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. And that knowledge was more valuable than any amount of money Amber had stolen or any car I had sold in retaliation.